Okay, let's just think about something for a second. A letter you use constantly, like every single day. Take R. Have you ever actually stopped to wonder why it looks like that or sounds the way it does? I mean, are
Yeah.
letters just arbitrary shapes and noises, things we all agreed on? Or is there maybe something, deeper going on, something tied to nature?
That's a great question. And it really gets to the core of what we're exploring in this deep dive. We're looking at some pretty fascinating source material today, drawing from research linked to Odam Tilly theory and, well, related ideas. And this research suggests maybe language isn't quite as random as we tend to think. It might actually be rooted in things like nature, emotion, logic even.
Right. And today we're zeroing in on just one letter, R, because according to this theory, R isn't simply a sound or a shape we write down. It's interpreted as this really powerful symbol
Yeah.
representing action, certainty, dominance, even.
Yeah, and they use a central metaphor that sounds, well, pretty wild at first.
The lion hunt. Yeah.
Exactly. The image of a lion hunting its prey is key to how they unpack the meaning of R.
Okay, a letter connected to a lion hunt. That feels like a bit of a jump.
It does initially, but when you dig into how the sources lay it out, the connections they draw are surprisingly, well, detailed and compelling. So our mission here is to walk through this perspective, see what hidden meanings this theory claims are packed into that everyday letter R.
All right, let's do it. Let's jump in. So, before the lion itself, what's the basic idea behind this Erdem Tilly theory about where language comes from?
Okay, so the fundamental concept is that the basic elements of language,
Mm.
the shapes of letters, the sounds we make, they aren't just pulled out of the thin air.
Hmm.
The theory proposes that these elements get their meaning from patterns we can see in nature, from basic human emotions, and from logical ways the world seems to work.
Mm.
So it's suggesting there's an inherent meaning, maybe even kind of universal significance, baked into these symbols, connecting language directly back to, well, reality.
So letters aren't just abstract placeholders, they're carrying some kind of almost primal information, a link to the world.
That's the idea, yeah. And the letter R is presented in this research as a particularly strong example of this principle.
Okay. Okay, I'm literally looking at an uppercase R right now. You've got the vertical line, the loop, the diagonal leg. How on earth do the sources connect that shape to a lion? I'm struggling to picture it right off the bat.
Right, it takes a little reframing. The theory interprets that shape not just as a letter, but as a specific posture. The posture a lion takes just before it strikes its prey.
Okay, walk me through it.
So think of it broken down. That vertical line, that's seen as the lion's grounded left front leg, planted firm, stable.
Okay, yeah, an anchor point. That makes sense.
Exactly. Then, that diagonal stroke,
Duh.
that's the right leg, it's coiled, pushing forward, ready for that burst of motion.
Uh-huh.
And the circular loop, the O, that's not the whole body. It's the head, lowered, facing forward, intensely focused, maybe lifted just slightly before the leap.
Wow, okay. Visualizing it like that, I can actually sort of see it now.
Yeah.
Crouching low, head forward, body kind of hidden. It looks like a really efficient stance.
Precisely. And the sources really stress that this posture isn't just random. It comes from natural efficiency. It's about saving energy by staying low,
Right.
shortening the distance to the prey, and maximizing the power and surprise of that final strike. Minimize the profile, get closer unseen, save energy for the explosion of movement.
So the actual shape of the letter R in this view visually encodes this principle, being coiled, ready, efficient for action.
That's the interpretation. The form itself, bent, active, poised, is seen as representing certainty and action.
Yeah.
The lion isn't dithering, it's committed.
Huh. Fascinating. Okay, so that's the visual side, the crouching lion, the preparation. Now, what about the sound, that R sound? How does that fit the metaphor? Where does that come in during this hunt scenario?
Right, so the sound connects to the climax, not the quiet stalking, but the moment after the catch. The sources describe the sound they link to R in this context as, well, not just a simple rolled but something deeper, more guttural, a vibrating sound. They actually write it as grrr.
Oh, right, like that deep rumble in the chest that kind of shifts into the rolled R sound you sometimes hear predators make.
Exactly that kind of sound. And according to the theory, this specific sound carries a very distinct meaning and emotion tied to that moment of capture. It's described as expressing instinctual jealousy, aggression, and absolute possession.
Jealousy.
Yeah, like the lion standing over its kill, roaring that message. This is mine. Stay back. It belongs to me. It's presented as a raw assertion of dominance over the object it has just claimed.
So the sound itself is a statement. Ownership. A warning. It's not just noise, it's like Emotional communication.
That's exactly how they interpret it. It's seen as reflecting this buildup of primal emotion related to claiming the result of its action and then releasing that energy as a signal, a communication of control, of possession. The sources call this subjective emotional action. The roar isn't just, a biological function. It's about expressing that claim from the subject's viewpoint.
Okay. So let's put it together. You've got the visual, the crouching shape, meaning preparation and certainty, and the sound, that possessive, dominant roar after the claim. How does Odom theory pull these together into the core symbolic meaning of R? What does R ultimately stand for in this framework?
Well, at its heart, R is presented as a symbol of subjectivity and certainty in action. Think about the lion hunt scenario. The lion is the active subject. It's the one doing the action. The prey is the object, the thing being acted upon.
Right, the doer and the done to.
Exactly. And the theory basically says R equals the subject in action. The subject isn't passive here. They're acting with clear, focused intent. And the sources really hammer home the certainty aspect. There's no hesitation, they argue, in either that coiled posture or that final roar. So the sound, the letter, through this lens, communicates absolute, unquestionable intent, the act of claiming and defending.
It sounds, definitive, like putting an exclamation mark on the action itself.
That's very much the idea. And the sources briefly contrast this with other letters mentioned in the broader theory. So unlike M, which might represent something more communal or mutual, think of a soft murmur sound maybe, or S, which they describe as perhaps more open-ended, suggestive, like a slithering or hissing, R is seen as finalizing the action. It's about the subject asserting itself and definitively claiming the object or the result.
Wow. So R isn't just marking a sound, it's embodying this whole architect, the active certain subject making its claim.
That's the interpretation put forward in this theory, yes.
Mm.
And it gets even more interesting when you start looking at how this supposed core meaning might be expressed or maybe stylized differently across various languages, potentially reflecting subtle cultural differences.
Okay. Like how the R sounds quite different in, say, English versus French.
Exactly like that. The sources point this out. In English, the R sound is often quite prominent, clearly articulated, right?
Yeah, definitely.
They connect this to English words, often tied to subjective intensity, action towards external goals, assertion, clarity. Think of words like roar, run, rule, rage, reach, right, reason, reign. A lot of those carry a sense of forceful action, a direction outward, or a strong assertion of position, which aligns pretty well with that subject in action idea.
The English R really does feel quite forward and direct in those examples, you're right.
Okay, now contrast that with French. The sources highlight the French R, often that guttural sound, further back in the throat, closer perhaps to that initial gear vibration they describe.
Right.
You hear it in words like rouge, red, rear, to left, Roy,
Getting
king.
the roadie sound.
Yes. And the theory suggests that this quality, maybe perceived as softer or more guttural compared to the English R, changes the feeling a bit. It doesn't necessarily lose the core possessive or assertive energy, they argue, but it might stylize it differently, maybe making it feel more introspective, refined, controlled, perhaps.
Yeah.
It's seen as arising from the same core instinct, but being channeled or filtered differently by the specific language and culture.
That is fascinating. So the same underlying energy, but expressed with a kind of cultural filter on it. Do the sources give any hints about why a language like French might internalize or style that assertive energy differently than English? Is there any speculation on that?
The specific source material we're drawing from for this deep dive doesn't go super deep into the why behind those cultural stylings. It mostly observes that languages seem to adapt these primal sound origins based on their own cultural worldview or aesthetic. They do also briefly mention Uzbek and other Turkic languages, noting how a strong R sound can be used there for very intense individual expression or powerful assertion, particularly in older forms, which they see as just more evidence supporting this proposed link between the sound's origin, its emotional weight, and how a culture shapes its expression.
So it's less about saying one language is more R than another, and more about how that fundamental R energy, for lack of a better word, gets molded or expressed by the language itself.
That seems to be the perspective presented, yes. Which brings us right back to that core image, doesn't it? That lion crouching, saving energy, the shape. The jealous, vibrating roar, claiming possession, the sound. That final, certain leap towards the goal, the action. According to this theory, these fundamental pieces are all somehow encoded in the letter R.
So R isn't just a symbol for a sound we make. It's presented almost as a fundamental concept, or like a verb, even, representing that specific kind of action and intention made visible and audible.
And for the researchers exploring these ideas, it's put forward as pretty compelling evidence, suggesting there might be this deep symbolic intelligence woven right into our language, linking it directly back to the physical world, the emotional world around us.
Wow, okay. That's a lot to think about from just one letter. Let's try to quickly recap this really intriguing deep dive. We've basically walked through one theory's interpretation of the letter R, starting with its shape mimicking a hunting lion,
Right, the reparation,
to its sound, representing that dominant certainty, that possessive roar,
the claim.
and then seeing how this core concept might resonate maybe with cultural variations across different languages.
It definitely makes you question that standard idea that letters are just, totally arbitrary inventions, doesn't it?
It really, really does. And it kind of leaves you, the listener, with this question to chew on. If the letter R, something we use without a second thought every single day, could potentially carry this kind of inherent natural meaning, this connection to primal instinct, to observable laws of nature, then what about all the other letters? A, B, C, S, M.
Yeah, how deeply might the actual building blocks of our language, the sounds, the shapes we use to form thoughts, to communicate, how deeply might they be connected to the natural world, to our most basic human instincts, in ways we just rarely, if ever, stop to consider?
It brings up that fundamental question, is language something we purely invented out of nothing? Or is it possible that at its deepest roots, it's actually a reflection, a kind of echo of the universal laws and behaviors we see playing out in nature itself?
That's definitely a thought that lingers.
Absolutely. So keep exploring, keep asking questions about the world around you, and maybe, just maybe, pay a little closer attention to the very language you use to understand it all.